The morning rush at Riverbend Cafe was already in full swing when a quiet young woman moved between tables with graceful precision. Her name was Taryn Ellis, 23 years old, soft-spoken and kind, with a gentle face that often went unnoticed amid the noise of clattering dishes and loud chatter. To most customers, she was just another waitress with a polite smile. But those who paid attention might notice her hands moving sometimes, shaping invisible words in the air, speaking a language no one else in the cafe understood. Taryn had been signing since she was 10. Her father had lost his hearing in a construction accident, and teaching herself American Sign Language became her way of holding on to him when words failed. He passed away a few years later, but Taryn never stopped signing. It comforted her, like a rhythm that belonged only to her heart. Some nights, when she walked home alone under the streetlights, she caught herself signing words like safe, strong, and keep going. It was how she prayed without sound. That Thursday morning, a black luxury car pulled up outside the diner. It looked foreign among the dusty pickup trucks and bicycles of Riverbend, a small town tucked between the hills of Northern California. Heads turned as the door opened and a tall man stepped out, dressed sharply in a dark suit that didn't belong anywhere near the smell of frying bacon and brewed coffee. He walked in, confident but distant, scanning the room like someone used to being observed. His name was Declan Ward, founder of one of the country's largest renewable energy companies, a billionaire whose face had graced magazine covers but whose eyes always seemed to be searching for something more. "Good morning," Taryn said quietly, handing him a menu. "Can I get you started with something to drink?" "Coffee," he replied, without looking up. "Black." She nodded, poured the coffee, and placed it before him. Declan sat in silence, his attention fixed on his phone, his expression unreadable. Taryn watched him for a second longer than she meant to. Something about his face, tired but disciplined, made her think he wasn't as unreachable as he looked. When she returned later with his breakfast, Declan finally glanced up. Their eyes met briefly before she signed a simple word without realizing it: enjoy. The motion was fluid, natural. He frowned slightly. "Did you just sign something?" Her cheeks flushed. "I'm sorry, yes. It's just a habit." "You know sign language?" he asked, curiosity softening his tone. Taryn nodded. "My dad was deaf. It's been part of my life since I was a kid." Declan nodded slowly, as though filing that away. "That's impressive," he said, his voice lower now, quieter. "You don't see that often." She smiled faintly and turned back to her work, unaware that this small moment would change both of their lives. Declan left a generous tip that day, but more surprising was that he came back 2 mornings later, this time not alone. With him was an older woman in her late 60s, dressed elegantly in soft lavender, her gray hair pinned neatly back. She had kind, bright eyes that darted around curiously but said nothing. Instead, when Taryn greeted them, the woman smiled, lifted her hands, and signed, "Hello." Taryn's face lit up immediately. "Hello. I'm Taryn. Welcome to Riverbend Cafe." The woman's smile deepened. Her name, as Declan explained, was Eleanor Ward, his mother. She had lost her hearing 20 years ago after a severe illness and had since lived quietly, rarely venturing out. But from the moment Taryn began signing with her, the diner filled with an invisible warmth. For once, Eleanor didn't look isolated or forgotten, she looked alive. Declan sat quietly, watching their hands move like poetry. He'd learned a little ASL years ago to speak with his mother, but business had pulled him away too often. Watching Taryn communicate with her so effortlessly made him feel both grateful and guilty. When their meal ended, Eleanor reached for Taryn's hand, squeezing it before signing, "Thank you. People don't talk to me anymore." "You did." Taryn smiled, tears prickling her eyes. "It's my honor," she signed back. "Your son must be proud of you." Eleanor chuckled silently and signed something else, glancing toward Declan. Taryn translated softly, "She says you look tired." Declan blinked, caught off guard, then laughed for the first time that morning. It was a real laugh, light, unguarded. "She's not wrong," he said. After that day, Declan and Eleanor began visiting often. Every time, Eleanor asked for the corner booth, where sunlight spilled through the windows. She and Taryn would sign for half an hour, about books, the weather, and sometimes things that made them both laugh. Other customers started noticing the unusual bond between them, whispering about the billionaire who spent his mornings at a small-town diner just to talk with a waitress. To Taryn, it didn't feel strange. It felt right. She had missed having someone to share silence with, someone who understood that communication wasn't just sound, but presence. One afternoon, after a long conversation that left Eleanor glowing, Declan waited until Taryn was wiping down the counter. "My mother hasn't smiled like that in years," he said quietly. "You've given her something no doctor or therapist could." Taryn looked surprised. "I didn't do anything special." "You did," he said. "You saw her." There was sincerity in his eyes that made her heart skip. But before she could respond, her manager called her to the back, and Declan left soon after, a thoughtful look on his face. That evening, Eleanor signed something during dinner that left Declan silent for a long moment. She wanted to offer Taryn a position, not as a waitress, but as her personal companion and interpreter. She trusted her completely. Declan hesitated, unsure how Taryn would react. But the next morning, he returned to the café and asked her. "I'm sorry, me," she said, stunned. "Work for your mother." "She insists," Declan said. "You've made a real difference in her life. She needs someone who understands her, and I think you'd be perfect." Taryn's heart raced. The offer was beyond anything she'd imagined. She could pay her late father's debts, finally go back to school, maybe even build a future. But she hesitated. "I'm not sure I fit into your world, Mr. Ward." Declan shook his head. "You don't need to fit into it. You'd make it better." That night, Taryn walked home beneath the street lamps, the cool wind brushing her cheeks. She thought of her father's hands, the way he used to sign, "Have courage." She looked up at the stars and whispered, "Okay, Dad. I'll try." The next morning, she accepted the job. Eleanor greeted her with open arms, and soon Taryn's world shifted completely. She moved from the noisy diner to the quiet halls of the Ward estate overlooking the cliffs of Carmel Bay. Mornings began with soft piano music echoing through sunlit rooms, and afternoons were filled with laughter and silent conversations over tea. For the first time since losing her father, Taryn felt she belonged somewhere. But not everyone was happy about her presence. Some of the staff whispered behind her back. "She's not one of us," one muttered. "She's just some small-town girl." Another smirked, "Give it time. The boss will get bored." Taryn pretended not to hear. She focused on Eleanor, helping her read lips, teaching her new signs, accompanying her on walks through the rose garden. Declan noticed. He saw how his mother's posture straightened, how her eyes sparkled when Taryn was near. And, slowly, he realized something else too. He found himself watching her, drawn to her kindness, her patience, her strength. One stormy evening, lightning cracked across the bay. The estate lost power, plunging the house into darkness. Eleanor had been reading in the glass atrium when it happened, and panic flashed in her eyes. She couldn't hear the thunder, but the flashes of light unsettled her. Taryn ran to her, knelt beside her chair, and signed calmly, "It's okay. You're safe. I'm here." Eleanor reached out, trembling. "You remind me of someone I lost," she signed. Taryn smiled gently through tears. "And you remind me of someone I loved." When Declan arrived minutes later, soaked from the rain, he froze at the sight before him, his mother and Taryn sitting by candlelight, their hands moving in fluid, heartfelt conversation. His mother's expression was peaceful. It was as if Taryn's presence had brought music back into a world that had been silent too long. In that quiet moment, Declan realized the truth that struck him deeper than any business deal or success ever had. This shy waitress had done what no one else could. She hadn't just reached his mother. She had reached him. Had before, that kindness could speak louder than sound. Over the next few weeks, Taryn settled into her new role as if she had always belonged there. She and Eleanor shared routines that soon felt sacred: morning tea by the window, reading novels together, slow walks along the coastal paths. Declan watched from a distance, amazed at how effortlessly Taryn had woven herself into their lives. For years, he had tried to fill his mother's loneliness with gifts, luxurious trips, and the best doctors money could buy. Yet this young woman, with her gentle heart and humble smile, had done it with nothing but understanding. But beneath Taryn's calm presence, she carried a quiet ache. One evening, while she and Eleanor were painting in the garden, Eleanor signed, "You carry sadness here," and pointed gently to her own chest. Taryn hesitated, her brush hovering over the canvas. "My father," she signed back. "I lost him when I was 16. He was deaf too. Teaching myself sign language was how we stayed close. After he died, I promised I'd never forget." Eleanor reached across the table and took her hand, her eyes full of compassion. "You kept your promise," she signed. "He would be proud." Taryn blinked away tears, nodding. Declan, who had stepped out to check on them, saw the exchange through the glass doors. Something tightened in his chest. It wasn't pity, he admired her strength. It made him wonder how often she had comforted others without anyone being there to comfort her. A few nights later, the Ward family hosted a private charity dinner at the estate. It was a grand event: string lights along the terrace, guests in expensive suits, glasses of champagne sparkling under the chandeliers. Taryn stayed close to Eleanor, interpreting conversations and making sure she felt included. But she could feel the eyes on her, the subtle judgment, the whispered questions. "Who's the new girl?" "She's the one Mr. Ward hired for his mother." "She's awfully close to him, don't you think?" Taryn pretended not to notice, focusing on her role. But when a guest approached Eleanor and began speaking quickly, forgetting she was deaf, Taryn stepped forward and began to interpret. The man's eyes widened. "You sign?" he asked. "Impressive. Declan, where did you find her?" Declan smiled faintly. "She found us, actually." The evening went smoothly until Eleanor excused herself early, leaving Taryn momentarily alone among the crowd. Declan approached with 2 glasses of water, offering one to her. "You handled tonight perfectly," he said. "I know those events can be overwhelming." "They're not my world," she admitted with a small laugh. "I'm just trying not to spill anything." "You belong more than you think," he said softly. His gaze lingered a moment too long before he looked away. "Thank you for taking care of my mother. She's happier than I've seen her in years." Taryn smiled. "She takes care of me too, you know. In her own way." Declan nodded, and for a moment, silence wrapped around them, not awkward, but warm. A quiet connection neither dared name. Days turned into weeks, and their bond deepened through small moments. Declan would find excuses to join them at breakfast, or ask Taryn's opinion on music, books, or his company's new community outreach project. She spoke with honesty, unafraid to challenge him when others wouldn't. It fascinated him, the way she saw people, not status. But peace never lasts without challenge. One morning, while Taryn was preparing Eleanor's breakfast tray, a member of the household staff approached her with a sneer. "You think you're special because the boss talks to you? Don't forget where you came from." Taryn's heart sank, but she didn't respond. Later, Eleanor noticed her distracted signing and asked what was wrong. Taryn smiled weakly and signed, "Nothing important." But Eleanor wasn't convinced. That afternoon, she summoned her son. Declan found his mother waiting in the garden, hands moving with urgency. "She's been hurt," she signed. "Not physically, words." People in this house forget kindness. Declan's jaw tightened. That evening, he gathered the entire staff and addressed them calmly but firmly. Taryn is part of this family. She has my full respect and trust. Anyone who treats her otherwise will no longer work here. No one spoke. Taryn stood in the doorway, stunned. Declan's voice had been controlled, but there was emotion in his eyes when he looked her way, a promise of protection she hadn't expected. After that, things changed. The whispers stopped. People began greeting her warmly, some even asking her to teach them basic sign language. The house, once filled with quiet division, began to feel more like a home. One late afternoon, Eleanor invited Taryn to the piano room. She sat before the old mahogany instrument and began playing, a soft melody that filled the air with emotion Taryn could feel rather than hear. When she finished, she signed, "This song was my husband's favorite. I haven't played it since I lost him." Taryn touched her chest, signing, "It's beautiful. You played it for love." Eleanor nodded. "Now I play it for hope." Declan, who had been standing unseen by the door, swallowed hard. His mother had just said what he'd been thinking for weeks. Taryn had brought hope back into their lives. The next day, Eleanor asked Declan to drive her and Taryn to a small community center nearby. It turned out to be a gathering place for the deaf and hard of hearing, a vibrant, welcoming crowd of people signing, laughing, and sharing stories. Eleanor introduced Taryn to everyone proudly, calling her, "the reason I came back to life." As the event wound down, a young girl approached Taryn shyly and signed, "You're lucky. You work for people who listen." Taryn smiled softly. "Sometimes you just have to speak with your hands until their hearts start listening." That night, back at the estate, Declan found Taryn on the balcony, gazing at the ocean. "My mother told me what you said," he began quietly. "You were right. I haven't been listening for a long time." Taryn turned, her eyes reflecting the silver light of the moon. "You're listening now." "I am," he said. Then, almost in a whisper, "You've changed everything, Taryn." She shook her head gently. "Your mother changed me too. We just hurt each other." Declan stepped closer, the sound of the waves filling the silence between them. "Maybe that's what we've all been missing," he said. "Real connection." For a moment, it felt like the world had gone still, the noise, the money, the distance, all faded. Just two people, standing in quiet understanding. The next morning, Eleanor called them both to the garden. She had prepared a small surprise, a certificate and a framed letter. "For you," she signed to Taryn. Taryn unfolded the letter. It was a formal job offer, not as an assistant, but as the director of a new community program Eleanor and Declan were founding, the Hands of Hope Initiative, dedicated to supporting deaf individuals and teaching ASL in underserved areas. Her name was printed right beside theirs. Taryn's hands trembled. "I don't deserve this," she whispered. "Yes," Declan said softly. "You do. You've reminded us what it means to listen, not just with ears, but with the heart." Tears filled her eyes as she turned to Eleanor, who signed one final message, "You were sent to us for a reason." That evening, as the sun dipped into the horizon, the three of them sat together by the window, the billionaire, his mother, and the shy waitress who'd bridged the silence between them. No grand words were spoken, no music played. But the peace that filled the room said everything. And for the first time in years, Declan's world didn't feel so empty. Because someone had taught him that even in silence, love could speak the loudest.